We are here with the crew of the third Mayrit Biennale of Architecture and Design held in Madrid with Miguel Leiro, the director, Joel Blanco, the curatorial director, and Marina Otero, the curator of Wet Dreams, which is one of the exhibitions that is part of the Biennale, which also provides the entire exhibit its conceptual framework.
Mayrit was born in a much more different manner than how we work now. It began as a festival ran by basically three friends that we started out sort of trying to find an alternative platform to support young designers, young architects. And slowly it's been evolving into a biennial format, working with a conceptual framework, adding a stronger academic practice per se to the biennial. And I think it's really enriched the project, and it's really helped us grow as well. To work with public institutions, particularly with the show in Centro with Marina is one of the great examples of this. And right now we're really happy where we are. I think this is our third edition, and we've had about, I think, 16 exhibitions and interacted with more than 100 artists and participants.
So I started with Mayrit as a curator, but then the thing was getting bigger and we needed some more direction, and I got into the role of curatorial director. So this year I invited Marina to react on the previous theoretical framework, which was the Drowned Walls by Institute of Postnatural Studies. And one of the things I asked Marina, and I think that she excelled at it, was to not think about these apocalyptic futures that they were bringing to us for the framework, and think more on something that it's proposing, or at least is more hopeful towards the future.
You are being so serious. I'm curious. Yes, so basically, this is a bunch of very, very young designers who are super crazy and decided to do something that seems impossible, to do an entire new biennial in Madrid. And they did it because the platforms that were available were even very extractive, or didn't allow emergent talent, emergent designers to participate. So when they called me, I was like, who is these people? And how they are going to pay me? And they pay me with a super fun experience.
Kindness,
and a lot of love and a lot of love. And what I like about it is that they are growing every year. To me, it looks like a megalomaniac experience, but they made it happen. And I want to support this type of project. So basically, I wanted to continue with the topics of previous edition about water, but we wanted to include other fluid matters. So Wet Dreams is about water, but also bodily fluids and the relation between our bodies and the body of the planet. But more importantly, it's about desire. Most of the times, architecture and design are participating in economies of desire, but most of the time as forms of consumption for products, of lifestyles. But those products and lifestyles are not aligned necessarily with the urgent questions of today. So we wanted to explore other forms of desire that will also be able to be enhanced through design and architecture. So that's what we have been doing.
how did the transition from a festival to a Biennale worked out, and what were the challenges of turning something that did not have a theme, and it was just like, let's get together and have fun as young designers, into something that has a framework, theme? And because I think it's challenging to go from something open-ended that just showcases young people's practice to something that try to do that, but at the same time stay faithful to some kind of like framework.
By creating this framework, we introduce ourselves obviously into a different world, much more related to research and academia, which is something that we're interested in. And we also thought it was something that was lacking in Spain, right? In terms of the proposals, as well as sort of consolidating Mayrit as something completely differentiated from the other platforms, right? Because we have a Madrid Design Festival, we have a Barcelona Design Festival, but none of them nor have the interest, nor does it work within their business model to introduce this component, right? And it's something that we're interested in because we really think that there's a need for it, right?
So Marina, maybe the next question will be from you, and it is, how did you negotiate between the sort of like, because you know what I mean? We have this saying in Farsi that says, you can only cook with what you have in your fridge and the cupboard, right? So how did you negotiate your own sort of like practice as an academic, as a teacher, and like your research, and what was available to you in the fridge and the cupboard of young Madrid design scene? How did you kind of like mix the two and found ways to connect them, found ways to bring the two together?
It was a very, let's say, organic process, because also I've been living outside Madrid for almost 15 years. So for me, it was also coming here with an outside view and being amazed by the type of, energy, creativity, humor that there is in the city.
So for me, two things stand out, and personally, why I thought the Wet Dream exhibition in the Centro like really worked for me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can prove me wrong. But is that first thing is that, sometimes great, challenging political, social exhibitions, right? They kind of like negate their essence by spending so much money in exhibition design and expensive surface of the exhibition. And I know part of it for you probably was like lack of like lots of money, but you artfully kind of like this humble look that the exhibition had really worked with the theme of what you were doing. So that's one thing, right? And I really believe in this sort of like, I don't know, you call it like a socialist aesthetics of exhibition, right? And then the second thing is that often in architecture shows, exhibitions, right? There's two routes these days. One is sort of like Hegelian Marxian negativity of like critique of colonialism, critique of, stuff and how architecture has been complicit. And then the other one is sort of like the, positivist, like, look how architecture and technology can help fix all your problems, right? But you kind of like, there was this balance between the two in your exhibition. There was enough critique and negativity, and enough constructivism in terms of like solutions, what is good. So maybe you can address these two a little bit, because I really thought the exhibition was successful in sort of like in these two sort of like dimensions.
Well, the first one, I have to acknowledge the work of Pablo Ferreira, who is the designer of the exhibition. And he has worked in the place before. And I think he's very skillful in how to negotiate such a complicated and beautiful space with little resources. So it's very little elements in design. It was like perhaps just the color and a few elements, and that's it. And I have to say that sometimes I tend to bring my architectural skills into the exhibition space, and sometimes it's at the expense of the works. And in this case, it's the opposite. I think each work finds its own way and a space in the exhibition. And I think that's a level of generosity that also brings the exhibition that I like. I have a critical view of the processes of design and architecture, but I'm also optimistic, but not in a naive way. It's just like, I think there is so much intelligence that I find in people thinking, working, that inevitably there is a form of addressing politics, but at the same time, I wonder, I always meet people that surprises me, that I get curious about their way they think and the way they operate. And this exhibition is somehow a love letter to all of those.
The way I saw it was that almost like the editorial was that like, given our current political and geopolitical limits, this is a humble way that architecture can suggest some solutions, rather than like we fix all your problems, or we're only there to point to what's wrong.
Yeah. There are people who says, look, we have to engage with our own waste and our own, toxicity, but they do it in an hedonistic, playful way. There are people who, instead of working with materials that are extracted, they work with their own bodies. They work with their body fluids. They work with menstruation. They work with like semen. They work with tears. They work with microbiotas. And that's interesting as well. It's their own way of being in the world, but also in relation to others, and thinking how all this fluidity brings larger politics. So you could say it's a form of hydrofeminism, engagement, and beyond, I will say as well.
I don't remember going to a biennale or exhibition like this, where you have one component provides the rest, the framework, right? And if you know, it's hard to diagram it on paper, right? Like, because if that's wet dream, it's part of something larger than itself, but it's also contain what's larger than itself. It's hard to diagram it. So if you can diagram it in words, how do you diagram? And the challenges of doing that, because I'm sure it's challenging. Because if you can't diagram it on paper, how the hell you diagram it spatially?
That's a great question. I think I usually describe it as sort of how the spinal cord works in the human body. So when we reached out to Marina, originally the idea was that Marina would develop a conceptual framework, and then that would be it. But what happened is we had a very strong interest from the institution, from Centro to develop a show. And that's when, talking with Joel, we realized this show, and particularly as well because of the timing that the show didn't open at the same time as the rest of the Mayrit shows. It actually opened in March. So at first we were a little bit stressed out about that, but as usual, you know, you have to, like you said, with the cupboard, no, you have to make do with what you have. And that's something that in Mayrit, it's basically what we do at the end of the day. We decided, and we saw the opportunity that Marina could develop this show where the conceptual framework has the same exact title as the exhibition, right? And what this does is it articulates, like I said, a spinal cord for the biennial, where if someone wants to understand really the backbone, the conceptual backbone of what the project is, they can go there. And then from there, go to, per se, a warehouse in the middle of nowhere and see a completely different exhibition done by university students, but be able to have this associative nature to it, right? And I think there's something really beautiful about that, because it helps us really get the message across that, you know, we love working with Marina and being able to work in institutions. But at the end of the day, Mayrit was born of a bunch of kids practically messing around in someone's warehouse or in some stranded place, doing something strange at the end of the day, right? And something experimental and awkward, no? So we really want to sustain both of these sides. And what was great about this opportunity was to translate the conceptual framework into an exhibition and have that be sort of I would usually describe it as the spinal cord, no, where everything's connected and it gives it structure, no, at the same time. And it connects to the mind as well, no? So
you know, actually, like, I think being in the new center was one of the best decisions I made in these last 2 years, I think. And it came up in a really, in a moment that I needed this kind of support. Also, not only the content, content aside, I think the content is great and it was really helpful. Like the seminars with Cecile, with Jason, with everyone, no? But also the network that you create there, I think it was amazing. Like you're here, there is also Alberto Jesus that was also participating in the Biennale somehow. So, and that's why I brought also Miguel to the new center. No, I was like, okay, there is something great here that I would love to share. But I mean, I think it helped me to develop a lot of my thinking, because especially because I was kind of I would say forced, because you are forced in somehow at the new center to listen to everyone when they are speaking and to see what are their points. And even if you don't agree, I think that's really enriching, because that's something you think more when you are like, when the Zoom call is off, you are like, okay, actually there is something there, no? And I really appreciate that. Like when you get thinking after a conversation that you have for 2 hours and maybe it was too long and you are like a bit tired and so on, and then you are like, wait a minute, I can take this home, no? And I think I took many things home, especially like many things I was just talking before in this within the same conversation was thoughts I had working at the new center with an assignment, no? Especially because those assignments are always encouraged to be mixed with your own work. And that was a good part, because I could just keep on researching on topics that I like, even through different seminars. And I think that's great. Like, even though you have your own project going on and your own research going on,